Hello, my friend. Today I bring you another lost legend from the depths of Middle-earth. Close your eyes, feel the magic surround you. Our journey begins.
There is a hill beyond the reed-choked ford where the grass does not grow straight. Each blade leans westward, even when there is no wind. The elders call it Thyrion's Rise, though none among the living know who Thyrion was, nor why her name persists when the stones around it have long since crumbled to dust. If you ask, the old women with river water eyes will only say she had light in her hands once and fall silent, as if the memory scorches the tongue. In summer, the slope is clothed in low-growing heather and the brittle petals of dusk lilies. Flowers the color of extinguished candles, pale and bruised at the edge. No bees visit them. No birds roost in the lonely tree that crowns the hill, its bark split with quiet groans when the stars wheel too near. Beneath it lies a circle of broken mirror shards, half buried in the soil like teeth, glinting when the moon is bold. I do not touch them. I did once. My fingers bled for a week, though there was no wound. There's a hush in that place, not the hush of reverence, nor of peace, but the hush that follows a name unspoken too long. You can feel it pressing just behind the breath, coiled in the air like something listening. Once, long ago, so long that even the willows cannot remember it rightly, the hill was not silent. Lanterns burned along its ridges in amber procession, and songs were sung in a tongue no longer sung. They say the songs were silver, not in sound but in shape, that they folded upon the air like veils, and if you closed your eyes, they would settle upon your shoulders like shawls woven from morning frost. But the song stopped, and when they stopped, the hill turned away from the sun. I was a child when I first climbed it, or perhaps I was older and only dreamt myself small to better bear what I found there. My grandmother had died, the last keeper of the old tongue, and the house had fallen too quiet, even for grief. It seemed the windows would never let the light in again. Not truly. The morning after her funeral, I went walking before the fog lifted, and the land led me. No one marked the path. I followed the curve of the river until it forgot to speak, until its current slowed to a murmur, like a prayer left unfinished. From there, the reeds opened, not bent, but parted, and I stepped through. I remember the way the air shifted, not colder, but older, like the difference between a breath and a sigh. At the foot of the hill, the wind stilled. My boots left no mark in the damp earth. Even now, I could not tell you how I reached the top, only that I stood beneath that gnarled tree and felt its shadow pass through me like a bell tolling below the skin. There was no vision, no voice, only the sense that something had been waiting. Not for me, but for the memory of me. And that memory had grown thin. When I looked down, I saw the shards. One of them caught the light and held it too long, as if unwilling to release it. Another held no reflection at all, only a faint red bloom beneath the glass, a stain or a seed. I bent to touch it and heard the sound of breathing, though my own lungs were still. It is not a place to explain. It is a place that remembers, even when you do not. And in its remembering, something seeps into the bones, slow and unshakable. I returned home, changed, though no one saw it. Grief has many masks, and mine was no different than theirs. A bowed head, a silent mouth. But the dreams came after. They were not nightmares. Number that would have been simpler. They were dreams of things undone, of silver threads snapping midweave, of a hand reaching through water but grasping only light, always fading. In time, I learned the name Thirian again. It came to me in the hush between dreams, spoken not aloud, but within the breath, as if breathed by the stone walls of my grandmother's hearth. Thirian, bearer of the last true shimmer. Thirian, whose sorrow lit the hill for 100 nights and 100 nights again. Thirian, who bled the stars into the soil to keep the memory of beauty from dying altogether. They say she carried a bowl made from the ribs of fallen deer, polished until it gleamed like water, and within it she kept the final echo of the Silmarils, not the jewels themselves, for those were long lost, but something of them, a gleam too heavy to bear, too bright to be seen without weeping. Her people came to look, and looking, forgot the shape of their own shadows. It is not a thing to see and live unchanged. But one night, the last of the 100, she poured the light into the earth. They say the grass tried to grow toward it, that even the lichen turned pale, that the tree at the summit split open from root to crown, though it still stands, bound by silence. No one knows why she did it, but all songs end, even the ones that are never sung. Sometimes, on the first frost of autumn, a pale mist coils around the hill, thick as wool. Children born in winter will not approach it until they are old. Birds veer wide. Bells rung in nearby villages do not echo there. And still, the lilies bloom, dust-colored, soft, and veined with light that has no source. There are those who say the hill is cursed, but curses are louder things. This is not a curse. This is a remembering so deep, it forgets even itself. I do not climb it now. I leave a stone at the edge of the ford each year, as is the custom. Some are smooth, some chipped, but I never choose them. The river gives what it will, and I lay it down without thanks. The old ways ask nothing, expect nothing. They endure. Perhaps that is what Thirian wanted. Not worship, not warning, only that the hill not forget the shape of the sorrow that fed it. There are nights I still dream of the bowl. Not holding it, no. Only watching. As it tilts forward, as the light spills, not in streams but in slow droplets that vanish before touching the ground. Each one heavier than it ought to be. Each one name that no longer has a voice to answer it. I wake before the last drop falls. There is no message in this, no lesson. Only the hush, only the hill, only the lilies blooming, year after year, in silence. And somewhere beneath the tree, a bowl that never held water, only light, and a question no one dares ask aloud. It is said that the river once curved differently, that it wrapped closer to the hill before bending away as if drawn to the light and then made to retreat. The bend is sharper now, sudden like a breath caught mid-sigh. But beneath that bend lies a patch of earth that never dries. Even in summer's reach, it glistens, dark and soft as sorrow. No reeds grow there, no frogs sing, only the low hum of memory pressed deep into the mud. There was a time when I tried to forget the hill, not out of fear, for fear has edges, and what I felt had none, but out of weariness. Grief without cause becomes heavy in the bones. It seeps into the posture, into the way the eye lingers too long on ruined things. I busied myself with repairs, thatch on the roof, oil on the hinges, salt by the door. The days moved like mist between stones. The birds nested and fled. The sun crossed the sky without pause. And still, somewhere beneath all that, the hill waited. I did not dream for a while. Or rather, I did not remember the dreams. They slipped through me like fish in a deep stream, glimpsed only in the turning, the shimmer, the wake. But one morning, just as the fog began to pale, I awoke with a scent in my lungs, not smoke, not rain, something older. The smell of wet lichen and closed rooms, the smell of stone that once held a name. That day, the bell in the west tower rang, only once. No one tends the tower anymore. The stairs gave way 2 winters passed, and the ropes were taken down for fire kindling. But still, it rang. A sound so low and wide, it passed through the chest rather than the ears. I did not go to look. There are things that should not be confirmed. Instead, I walked the old path behind the orchard, where the moss folds thick across the stones and the trees lean as if hearing something underground. I walked slowly, with care, though the way was familiar. The ground was soft beneath the heel, crumbling slightly, as if something beneath had stirred in sleep. Beyond the orchard lies the ruin, not of a house nor of a temple, but of something older than both. A wall perhaps, though it no longer marks anything, just a stretch of crumbling stone, half swallowed by ivy and time. The air there holds a hush different from the hills. It is not listening. It is remembering. The kind of remembering that makes you step lighter, speak lower, breathe less. I used to come here as a child, when the grief was newer, and I thought ruins could be mended. I brought string and little nails and scraps of linen to wrap around broken edges. I thought if I could make it whole, I might be whole again too. But the stone never shifted. It did not welcome nor refuse. It simply remained. This time I came with empty hands. I sat on the fallen sill of what may once have been a window and let the stillness take root. There were no birds, no breeze, only the faint sound of dripping, steady, unhurried, as if the ruin wept in a rhythm it had long forgotten how to question. And then behind me a breath, not heard, felt, as though the ruin exhaled, or remembered the shape of someone long gone. I turned slowly, and there, in the earth, was something new. A mark. No hand had made it, not recent, not sharp. Just a deepening of the soil in the shape of a bowl. Not the object itself, only the absence of it. A cradle of earth where something once rested and had been taken, or perhaps left behind. I did not touch it. Instead, I whispered the name. Not aloud, not fully. Just enough to let the ruin know that I had not forgotten. Thirion. The lichen on the stone wall darkened slightly, as though dampened by recognition. It is strange how absence shapes the world. We speak often of what is present, the blooming, the breaking, the seen. But it is the things that are missing that mold us. The chair left empty, the window unopened, the silence after a name no longer spoken. And here, in this ruin, I could feel that shape deepening, not just of a bowl, not just of a woman, but of something meant to be seen and no longer seen. As the sky paled, I noticed something glimmering faintly at the edge of the stones. Not light, something beneath light, a shimmer like memory catching in the eye. I stepped toward it slowly, as one approaches a grave they never believed they would find. It was not a jewel, not glass, only a thin strand of silver root, pulsing faintly beneath the moss. It did not move, it did not glow. But in that moment, I understood that it had once connected things, not just roots to soil, but sorrow to the world. A thread not of blood, but of grief spun so finely it had become sacred, and now it frayed. I left it untouched. The walk home was longer. The orchard leaned more heavily. The birds watched but did not speak. Even the path seemed to sag, as though bearing too many feet that no longer walked it. But I felt something new in my bones. Not a knowing, not even a memory, but an ache that had taken shape. The bell did not ring again, but the sound remained in me. I sat that night with the window open, watching the stars refuse to settle. They drifted slightly, not wrong, just uncertain, as if the sky itself remembered something it could not name. The dreams returned. This time I stood on the hill, not as I was, but as someone watching me, watching from beneath the tree, from within the shadow of a memory older than flesh. I held the bowl in my hands, but it was empty, not because it had been poured, but because it had never been filled, not truly. And I wept, not with sorrow, but with reverence. For emptiness that still bore weight, for light that was never seen, only born, for a name spoken once in full and then forever scattered. I awoke with the scent again, stone, lichen, closed rooms. The window had not moved, but there on the sill was a single dusk lily, soft where pale, veined in red, still damp with dew that had not fallen. And the question came then, gentle, unfinished. What is it that remembers us when we no longer can? There is a clearing east of the ruin where the fog never quite lifts. Even at noon, when the sun presses hard against the valley, the light drapes there as though wrapped in mourning cloth. The trees form a circle, not deliberate but abiding, and in the center lies a stone pool so shallow it barely holds the rain. Yet the moss clings to its rim in soft reverence, as if it remembers something more vast. I came upon it by forgetting the path. My feet had meant to find the well behind the mill, an old habit, but the wind turned and the scent of damp cedar pulled me elsewhere. I did not resist. Sometimes the land knows the soul better than the soul knows itself. The trees made no sound. Their branches did not sway. Even the leaves, thin and papery with age, stayed still as ink. The hush here was not of waiting. It was the hush of remembering too much. When I stepped into the clearing, my breath did not follow me. It stayed behind, as though unsure. The air was cool, not from weather, but from time. The way cellars are cool and long-sealed letters, a quiet that lived beneath the skin. The pool lay at the center like a forgotten eye. Its surface held no ripple, no insect, no leaf. Only sky folded strangely. The clouds did not move within it. I knelt beside it, not to peer, but to feel the edge. The stone was warm, faintly, as if someone had sat there not long ago. And there, in the faint wet film, where moss kissed stone, I saw it. Not a reflection, no. A suggestion. The outline of a handprint, not pressed from above, but rising from beneath. As though someone long buried had once reached upward, and memory had remembered where their fingers fell. It did not frighten me. If anything, it ached. I laid my palm beside it, not touching. The sizes did not match. The fingers curved longer, finer. A woman's hand, perhaps, or something that had once been one. And though the stone was firm beneath the moss, I felt for the briefest moment the echo of warmth return to my own skin. I did not speak her name, not because I had forgotten it, but because the trees had not. They do not speak as we do. Their silence is fuller, richer, layered like bark. And in that silence, I heard not a voice, but an impression, a drifting, of someone who once knelt as I did, hands cupped over the pool, whispering to the water not for answers, but for remembrance. They say the pool once held light, not from the sky, but from within. A pale shimmer like moon powder stirred in milk, soft and sacred. that it would glow faintly only when sorrow was near. And many came in secret to weep there, not for healing, for keeping, because some sorrows are not meant to be released, and so, over years, over decades, the water deepened, not in depth, but in weight. It grew thick with unseen names, and the trees grew inward, protecting what had been given, what was too heavy for the soul to bear alone. I stayed until dusk gathered, not from fear, not even from reverence, but because the light had begun to falter in a way that asked for stillness. The wind stirred once, low and round, and a single leaf fell onto the pool. It did not float. It sank, slowly, as though remembering how, and in its descent, the water shifted, not disturbed, but awakened. A thin thread of brightness spiraled up from the center, coiling like breath from a candle just blown. It did not reach high, only enough to touch the air and dissolve. But within that brief glow, I saw something. Not clearly, not fully, only the outline of a bowl, shaped like silence, held in hands that did not tremble, and gone before the moss could speak its name. I walked home with care that night. Each step was a return, not just in distance, but in memory. The path did not change, but the trees beside it leaned slightly differently, as if they'd turned to watch, as if they too remembered the weight of the handprint by the pool. Back in my cottage, the dusk had already crept across the floorboards, curling in the corners like tired animals. I did not light a lamp. I did not need to. There was enough light in what I carried back. Not seen, but felt. A flickering just behind the heart. I boiled water, sat by the hearth, let the warmth unspool the damp from my skin. And all the while, that image remained. The bowl, the leaf, the thread of light rising once like memory breathing. Sleep did not come soon, but it came gently. And in the dream, I stood again by the pool. Only this time there were no trees, only salt, white and endless and dry. The pool was there, cracked and dust-lined, empty now. And yet, the handprint remained, faint, but carved deeper than before. I traced its edge, and when I looked up, the sky was veiled in linen the color of old ash, and falling through it, not rain, not snow, but petals. Pale, veined with red, the same as those on the hill. They did not settle. They hovered, as if undecided, as if listening. When I woke, my hands were damp, not with sweat, not with rain, with something older, something that remembered the shape of sorrow before the world had words for it. And outside the window, though no wind stirred the trees, a hush passed through the orchard, like a slow hand closing a book not yet finished. There is a clearing east of the ruin where the fog never quite lifts. Even at noon, when the sun presses hard against the valley, the light drapes there as though wrapped in mourning cloth. The trees form a circle, not deliberate but abiding, and in the center lies a stone pool so shallow it barely holds the rain. Yet the moss clings to its rim in soft reverence, as if it remembers something more vast. I came upon it by forgetting the path. My feet had meant to find the well behind the mill, an old habit. But the wind turned, and the scent of damp cedar pulled me elsewhere. I did not resist. Sometimes the land knows the soul better than the soul knows itself. The trees made no sound. Their branches did not sway. Even the leaves, thin and papery with age, stayed still as ink. The hush here was not of waiting. It was the hush of remembering too much. When I stepped into the clearing, my breath did not follow me. It stayed behind, as though unsure. The air was cool, not from weather, but from time. The way cellars are cool and long-sealed letters, a quiet that lived beneath the skin. The pool lay at the center like a forgotten eye. Its surface held no ripple, no insect, no leaf, only sky folded strangely. The clouds did not move within it. I knelt beside it, not to peer, but to feel the edge. The stone was warm, faintly, as if someone had sat there not long ago. And there, in the faint, wet film where moss kissed stone, I saw it. Not a reflection, no, a suggestion. The outline of a handprint, not pressed from above, but rising from beneath, as though someone long buried had once reached upward, and memory had remembered where their fingers fell. It did not frighten me. If anything, it ached. I laid my palm beside it, not touching. The sizes did not match. The fingers curved longer, finer. A woman's hand, perhaps, or something that had once been one. And though the stone was firm beneath the moss, I felt, for the briefest moment, the echo of warmth return to my own skin. I did not speak her name, not because I had forgotten it, but because the trees had not. They do not speak as we do. Their silence is fuller, richer, layered like bark. And in that silence, I heard not a voice, but an impression, a drifting, of someone who once knelt as I did, hands cupped over the pool, whispering to the water not for answers, but for remembrance. They say the pool once held light, not from the sky, but from within. A pale shimmer like moon powder stirred in milk, soft and sacred. That it would glow faintly only when sorrow was near, and many came in secret to weep there. Not for healing, for keeping, because some sorrows are not meant to be released. And so, over years, over decades, the water deepened, not in depth, but in weight. It grew thick with unseen names, and the trees grew inward, protecting what had been given, what was too heavy for the soul to bear alone. I stayed until dusk gathered, not from fear, not even from reverence, but because the light had begun to falter in a way that asked for stillness. The wind stirred once, low and round, and a single leaf fell onto the pool. It did not float. It sank, slowly, as though remembering how. And in its descent, the water shifted, not disturbed, but awakened. A thin thread of brightness spiraled up from the center, coiling like breath from a candle just blown. It did not reach high, only enough to touch the air and dissolve. But within that brief glow, I saw something. Not clearly, not fully, only the outline of a bowl, shaped like silence, held in hands that did not tremble, and gone before the moss could speak its name. I walked home with care that night. Each step was a return, not just in distance, but in memory. The path did not change, but the trees beside it leaned slightly differently, as if they'd turned to watch, as if they too remembered the weight of the handprint by the pool. Back in my cottage, the dusk had already crept across the floorboards, curling in the corners like tired animals. I did not light a lamp. I did not need to. There was enough light in what I carried back, not seen, but felt, a flickering just behind the heart. I boiled water, sat by the hearth, let the warmth unspool the damp from my skin. And all the while, that image remained, the bowl, the leaf, the thread of light rising once, like memory breathing. Sleep did not come soon, but it came gently. And in the dream, I stood again by the pool. Only this time, there were no trees, only salt, white and endless and dry. The pool was there, cracked and dust-lined, empty now. And yet, the handprint remained, faint, but carved deeper than before. I traced its edge, and when I looked up, the sky was veiled in linen the color of old ash, and falling through it, not rain, not snow, but petals, pale, veined with red, the same as those on the hill. They did not settle, They hovered, as if undecided, as if listening. When I woke, my hands were damp, not with sweat, not with rain, with something older, something that remembered the shape of sorrow before the world had words for it. And outside the window, though no wind stirred the trees, a hush passed through the orchard, like a slow hand closing a book not yet finished. There is a chapel that leans just slightly eastward, its steeple bent, as though whispering into the wind. No road leads to it now. The grass has risen high, soft as breath, and even the stones beneath have begun to forget their shapes. Its door is never shut, though no one opens it. The hinges gave up long ago, and now it hangs crooked in the frame, like a memory misremembered. I found it by accident, or perhaps by invitation. The sky had been colorless that morning, the kind of gray that steals all edges. I had meant only to walk, to follow the ridgeline where the moss grows thick and the ravens do not land. But the air turned hollow, and the silence deepened around me, not empty, but full of a pause too long held. That is when I saw the roof, thatched once, now bald in patches, moss threading its eaves, and knew it was not a place one stumbles upon without reason. The chapel sat in a hollow of the land, cupped like something being carried. A long crack ran down one wall, and the windows had no glass. Only the narrow bone frame arches remained, through which fog drifted like a low breath. A single bell hung in the steeple, green with age, and it did not move, not even in the shifting air. I did not go in, not at first. I stood at the threshold, where the stone step had broken into 3 soft pieces, and let the stillness pass through me. Something inside had not been disturbed in a long time. Not just dust, but time itself. And to cross into it felt like entering not a room, but a wound. When I did step through, the air was colder. Not cruel, just closer. The scent was of damp wood, wilted flowers, and stone that had once been held sacred. Inside, the pews were broken, their backs bowed in surrender. Ivy curled through the cracks in the floor, and faint outlines of painted shapes clung to the walls like old sighs. One, just above the altar, caught my eye. A bowl, again a bowl, outlined in faded ochre, rimmed with pale red. So faint I might have missed it had the light not shifted just so. Beneath it, a single line of script, too worn to read, too familiar not to feel. I approached slowly. The altar had collapsed at one corner, but the surface still bore the shape of hands once laid upon it. Not carved, only worn, like stone that had been touched so often it remembered. I laid my fingers there, and for a moment, the chapel seemed to breathe around me. The dust lifted, just barely. A tremble passed through the ivy, and then stillness returned. But within that stillness, I heard it. Not with the ears, not with the skin, with the part of the soul that listens between thoughts. A voice, not speaking, mourning, not loud, not even clear, only a rhythm, like rocking, like chanting, like the way one hums when they have no more tears. I stayed long, not moving, letting that rhythm settle beneath my ribs, letting the weight of it fill the places that had forgotten how to be full. There was grief here, but not grief that begged to be healed, only the kind that asked to be witnessed. It is strange, the shapes sorrow takes. Sometimes it is a field left untended, sometimes a name carved into a doorframe no one notices, and sometimes it is a chapel, tilted, empty, blooming with rot, holding a silence more sacred than any sermon. When I finally left, I did not turn back. Some places are not meant to be looked at twice. The wind followed me gently, as if uncertain. I walked without map or aim, but I knew the land had marked me. Something had shifted, not broken, just turned, like a key within a lock whose door you never meant to open. That night, I did not sleep easily, not from fear, from fullness. My dreams had weight. In them, the chapel stood upright, whole. Candles flickered in the windows, and shadowed figures sat within, unmoving. No faces, no voices, only presence. The air was golden, thick with dust, and the bowl above the altar gleamed, filled not with light, but with silence itself. I watched from outside, and I wept. Not for what I saw, but for what I could. Not for the way the chapel seemed to know me, as if I had once sat there, as if I had once left something behind on the altar. A name, a vow, a sliver of my breath. And the building had kept it safe all this time, waiting not to be thanked, only remembered. I woke before the candles went out. The wind had shifted again. The trees outside leaned westward now, and the dawn light touched everything too softly, like it was afraid. I did not return to the chapel. I do not think I will. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between dusk and sleep, I feel the weight of that bowl again. Not in my hands, but just above them, as though it hovers still, not asking, not warning, just being. And I wonder if there are other places like it, not marked on maps, not spoken in stories, only waiting for feet that wander, for souls that ache, for silence deep enough to echo something older than sound. And I wonder, though I dare not ask, if it was ever really built at all. There is a field beyond the old dovecote, where the earth folds gently inward, as if it once held something precious and has never unlearned the shape. It is not marked on any chart, nor spoken of in the market lanes. But if you walk west at twilight, past the crooked fence, where the nettles have swallowed the stones, and keep walking long after the path gives up, you will find it. Not by direction, by feeling. The air grows dimmer there, not darker, just quieter. Colors turn soft at the edges. Greens become ash blue, browns settle into gray, and even the sky thins into something silkier, almost translucent. It is a place where sound folds inward, not muffled, remembered. I found it once, when I was neither young nor old. The day had been long in a way I could not explain, the kind of longness that follows after dreams, when the body carries something it cannot name. I had wandered without aim, guided by nothing but a thread of sorrow I had not known I still carried. And the field welcomed it, not with warmth, with recognition. The grass there is short, but not from grazing. It grows weary. Each blade leans towards the center, toward the hollow, as if pulled by a gravity not of earth, but of memory. Wildflowers bloom, but only in faded tones, dusky violet, bruised cream, the color of parchment left too long in rain. At the center of the field is a ring of stones, smooth, round, none higher than the knee. Some are cracked. Others bear the faint marks of chisel or nail. But most are simply themselves, worn not by time, but by touch. Not many know this place, but those who do have knelt here, their grief is woven into the lichen. I stepped between the stones with care. The air shifted, not colder, not heavier, just deeper, like falling through silk. And at the very center, sunk into the soil like the eye of an old god, lay a basin of grey stone, wide, shallow, rimmed with moss, empty, and yet not. I did not kneel. I stood there, hands still, breath slow, a hush held. The air like a bowl holds water. I felt it fill me, not with clarity, not with peace, but with the echo of something once whole, something spilled, something gathered. They say the basin was meant to reflect the sky, that when the wind was right and the stars were kind, the night would look down and see its own face. That to look into it was to remember what it meant to be watched by something without voice or form, something ancient enough to remember us before we were ourselves. But now the basin holds only shadows, not cast from above, born from within. I saw my own reflection there, but not as I am, as I was perhaps, or might have been. Eyes closed, mouth moving, no sound, just the shape of a lament, passed down too many generations, worn smooth and formless by time. The longer I looked, the more the image faded, not into darkness, but into light. Not brightness, but the kind of pale that comes after snow when the world forgets its own edges. And for a moment, I forgot my name, not in fear, in softness, in the way a hill forgets the sound of footsteps once they have gone. Around the basin, the ground bears no footprints. It never does. The grass leans back into itself as soon as the weight has passed. Even my own felt uncertain, fading as I turned. This place keeps no record. It only remembers through forgetting. I left a stone on the rim, as I had been taught, not from duty, from resonance. The stone was nothing special, smooth, dull, warm from the sun. But as I set it down, I felt a whisper pass through the ground. Not words, a shift, as though the field had accepted my grief into its quiet ledger. On the way home, I did not retrace my steps. The path had gone, not hidden, healed. The field does not offer return. That night, I dreamt of mirrors, dozens, maybe hundreds, scattered across a floor of black water. None reflected the same sky. Some showed dawn, others dusk, and one held no light at all. Only the outline of a bowl, floating, turning slowly in silence, as though choosing a direction it would never take. And in the dream, I heard a name, not spoken, remembered, not by me, by the mirror. It wept. The sound was not sorrowful, only steady, like rain inside a house that has no roof. When I woke, my pillow was damp. The air smelled faintly of wet lichen and scorched pine, the scent of a place that does not burn, but remembers burning. For days after, I could not find the field again. I wandered near the dovecote, past the nettles, through the hush. But the land had turned. The silence was different. Listening, but no longer open. Still, sometimes, I feel the basin in my hands, though I have never lifted it. I feel the smooth curve of its edge, the weight of its emptiness, the way it hums without sound. And I wonder if that stone I left still rests there, or if it too has been absorbed, dissolved into memory. There are places like this, scattered through the world. Not ruins, not shrines, just places that hold what we cannot. The ache beneath a closed window, the light that lingers in a doorway long after the figure has gone, the echo of a voice not heard, but remembered in the body. And when you find them, they do not explain, they do not answer, they only open for a moment and then close again. But something stays, not in the place, in you. And when you sleep, you will know it, in the hush between the stars, in the silence beneath your name, in the weightless ache of a bowl that was never yours, but somehow always empty, waiting, listening, as though it knew you before the sky had learned to weep. There is a stair carved into the eastern cliffside that leads nowhere. Each step is shallow, worn soft by weather, and curved slightly inward, as if shaped by feet that no longer belong to this world. They begin just above the tree line, where the wind starts to forget the names of things and they ascend until they vanish into fog that never lifts. No railing, no handholds, only the pale stone steps, swallowed slowly by sky. No one builds stairways like this anymore, and no one remembers who did. The elders say they were found, not made, already there when the first moss touched the valley, already there when the last birds left the heights. I stood before them once, long after the sun had fallen behind the hills. The cliff face glowed faintly in the dusk, not from light, but from memory. Lichen clung to the edges of the steps in pale fronds, like fingertips still reaching. The silence was rich here, not a lack, but a fullness. The way old songs fill a room, even after the voice has long since quieted. I placed one hand on the stone. It was warm, though the air was cold, and in its warmth was the faintest pulse, not alive exactly, remembered, like something breathing only in recollection. I did not climb. It is not a place for climbing. It is a place for listening, and the stone speaks slowly. I sat at the base, on a ledge just wide enough to cradle thought, and let the silence settle around me. The wind moved above and below, but not here. Here, the air was still, held, and in that holding, I saw them. Not with the eyes, but with the part of the self that remembers what it has never known. Figures, thin as mist, pale as breath, moving along the steps in slow procession, not upward, not downward, but in between. As though they were neither ascending nor returning, only continuing, a pilgrimage with no altar. A journey made not to arrive, but to remember movement itself. They did not look at me, but they knew I was there. Their presence brushed the skin lightly, like a forgotten name spoken near the ear. A tingling, a ripple, the faint tremor of significance too long buried to be deciphered. They bore no torches, no cloaks, nothing to suggest purpose. Only one among them held something, cradled against her chest. It was a bowl, not ornate, not glowing, simply shaped, smooth at the rim and dark with use. She carried it the way one carries silence, gently, without needing to understand. And as she passed the fifth step, a single drop fell from its edge. It did not strike stone. It vanished. But the sound it made, if it was sound at all, echoed for a long time, not outward, inward. I felt it in the bones, in the hollows between thoughts. A tone not meant to be heard, but remembered, as if every sorrow I had ever folded into the corners of my being had found a mirror in that note. The figures continued, one by one, fading into the mist above until even their outlines dissolved. Only the stair remained, glowing faintly, as though lit from within by the passage of so many silences. I sat a while longer, long enough for the fog to lower, long enough to feel the weight of what I had not touched. There was no temptation to follow, only the knowing that I had stood where others had passed. And in that knowing, something inside me loosened, not broken, only shifted, like a branch easing under snow. The walk home was quiet. The trees did not rustle, the stones did not shift, even the owls were still. And beneath my feet, the path did not resist. It accepted, as if it too had waited for this soft return. That night, I did not light the hearth. I left the house dark and open, let the wind trace the lintel, let the night step slowly through the room. And when I lay down, I placed one hand against my chest, just below the collarbone, where the ache of the bowl had settled. Sleep came not as a curtain, but as a door slowly opening, and in the dream, I stood again at the base of the stair. But this time, the stone pulsed with light, not bright, not dazzling, just aware. It recognized me. And the steps were no longer empty. They hummed. Each one whispered a name I had forgotten. Not my own. Others. Names that brushed past me in the market. Names sewn into old coats. Names we speak only when we think no one listens. And at the top, far above the mist, something waited. Not a god. Not a judgment. Only a mirror. Still. Clouded. Wide as a lake and thin as sleep. I did not climb. Not in the dream. Not even then. But I knew if I did, I would not see my face. Only the shape of what I had carried. The bowl, the silence. The procession that lives just beyond the veil of time, walking a stair that leads nowhere. Not because it is lost, but because it is complete. I woke with my hand still over my heart, and the house was colder than it had been. Not unpleasant, just hollowed, like something had passed through and left the air changed. I looked to the window. The mist had come down from the heights, soft where patient, filling every corner. And though the cliff lay far beyond my view, I felt the stair still rising, quiet, eternal, in a world just beneath this one, where every grief has a name, and every name walks onward, step by step, into a silence that holds all things. There is a glade beyond the salt-bleached birches, where the ground never dries. The water there is not deep, nor does it shimmer. It pools low in the hollows between roots, in stillness so complete that time forgets to pass. A breathless kind of stillness, like the held moment before a name is spoken. Or lost. I arrived without plan. The path had turned by itself, softer than memory, and led me through the thin white trees whose bark flakes like old paper, whose branches curve downward, not from wind, but from knowing. Even the birds did not rest here. Their songs fell short, swallowed before they reached the edges of the glade. The moss beneath my boots gave way to shallow water, the kind that does not ripple when disturbed. I did not step back. Some places invite without permission. Others permit only by recognition. This was the second kind. The silence pressed gently against the skin, not as warning, but as welcome. A quiet reserved for those who had forgotten something important. There was no center to the glade, no stone, no altar, only a depression in the earth, circular, edged with reeds that never swayed. In the middle of that depression, beneath a thin skin of unmoving water, lay something that might once have been a table, or a bed, or a resting place for something not made to last. Its outline was clear, but its form elusive. I could not tell whether it was wood or stone, old or ancient, sunken or rising. The water veiled it in a way that refused clarity, a reflection that offered no answers, only shape. I sat by the edge. My shadow reached across the surface like a question. And the longer I watched, the more the water deepened, not in measure, but in meaning. It became something more than water. A memory folded so tightly that it had taken liquid shape. A pool not of rain, but of forgetting. There were petals floating on its skin, pale, thin, curled at the edge like sleep. They moved not with breeze, but with breath. Not mine, but something slower, something older. As if the glade itself inhaled once every 100 years, and this was its exhale. And in the silence, I remembered a lullaby, not sung, hummed, the kind of melody that lives behind walls, the kind passed down through hands, not mouths. I had not heard it since childhood. I had not known I remembered. The tune brushed the edge of thought like fog rolling over a field at dawn. And with it came the image of a hand, not mine, trailing gently through water like this, gathering petals. Not to keep them, only to feel their weightless resistance, the hush of their surrender. It might have been my grandmother's hand, or someone else's. Someone I had never seen and never would, and yet felt buried somewhere beneath the ribs. The memory did not explain itself. It only lingered, like the scent of smoke in a room where no fire burns. I stayed until the sky began to blue, not brighten. The glade had no need for light, but the world beyond it stirred, and I could feel the edge of it tugging at my coat, at my thoughts, at the thread that connected this place to the places where time still moved. Before I left, I placed my hand over the water, careful not to touch. My fingers cast 5 long shadows over the reflection, and for a moment, I saw not my own face, but a bowl, half submerged, half formed, its rim smooth, its center hollow. No light inside it, only stillness, as if it had not been emptied, as if it had never been filled. The petals began to drift toward it, one by one, drawn not by force, but by remembrance. I watched them gather in silence, circling, as if trying to recall their own purpose. Then I turned away. Some things are not meant to be seen to their end. Some endings are quieter than beginnings. The walk back was slow. The birches leaned overhead like listening figures, their bark flaking into thin curls that fell without sound. The path did not harden beneath me. The moss did not rise again. Only the fog thickened, softening the edges of every tree, every thought, every sorrow. That night, my dreams did not arrive, only a long grey hush, a dreamless drift, wide and cold, like lying inside a bell that no longer rings. But when I woke, I felt the damp, on my palms, beneath my nails, as though I had touched the water after all, as though something in it had answered. The scent in the air was of iron and reeds, of flowers too pale to name. I stepped outside and found the grass pressed flat in a circle near my door. Nothing broken, nothing taken, only the shape of a bowl left in shadow and a trail of petals leading back to the trees. Software unwilted, waiting. Since then, I have not returned to the glade, but I know it watches. Not with malice, not with hope, with the gaze of something that holds what others discard. The glade is not a place of death, it is a place of keeping, of things too quiet to bury, too gentle to burn. And now, sometimes, when I close my eyes before sleep, I feel the edge of that water rising, cool and patient, to meet my breath. And the bowl, empty as ever, waiting again beneath the surface, not asking for memory, only receiving. There is a path that drifts through the heathered moors where no footprints last. It does not wind like a trail shaped by travelers, nor stretch with the purpose of roads. It simply continues, softly, quietly, with the gentle persistence of breath. Moss grows at its edges, a shade too pale, and small white stones line its way, not placed, merely found and never moved. No one walks the path with haste. The air there presses inward, not heavy, but close, as if memory itself were stitched into the mist. It smells of cold smoke and rain that never fell, of something left simmering on a forgotten hearth. I came upon it in the hush after rain, the ground still damp with the weight of weather. A flock of silent birds flew overhead, not in formation, but in agreement, and I followed their direction until the moor opened into a long, slow corridor of grey. The path welcomed nothing. It simply was. A quiet thread drawn through the low hills, vanishing behind one fold and reappearing before the next. I stepped onto it without thought, and the ground accepted me. Not beneath, within. My feet sank just slightly, as if the soil was not earth, but woven breath, and it remembered me from somewhere older than memory. There were no landmarks, only the slope of the world folding away into mist. Yet as I walked, I began to feel the presence of things not seen, not watching, not guiding, simply present. The way old words remain in a room after being spoken. To my left, a field of standing stones stretched toward the horizon. Wide, flat-faced, each turned slightly inward, like figures mid-listen. Some leaned, others cracked. One bore a crown of red lichen, blooming like rust. I did not leave the path. My breath slowed. My eyes did not seek to count. They were not monuments. They were not warnings. They were names, perhaps, long since worn smooth. On my right, the moor dropped into a hollow where the mist curled deeper. Through it, I saw the faint outline of a structure, too small for a house, too old for a barn. Its roof had long since given way, but 4 posts remained, each wrapped in thick vines that bore no leaves. In the center stood a table of low stone, barely visible above the reeds, and on it, a dark shape, indistinct but heavy. I knew, without knowing, what it was. Another bowl. Not a replica, not a twin, a continuation. Each one I had seen belonged to the same silence, the same sorrow made physical. This one bore it differently, not in stillness, but in waiting. The air around it held not reverence, but recognition. I did not approach. The path curved slightly, as if bowing around that hollow, and I walked with it, holding my breath, not out of fear, but from the echo that lingered in my chest. The echo of a name I could almost recall, though it never quite rose to the surface. The mist thickened. The stones grew fewer. The moor fell silent in a deeper way, the way a chapel does just after the last candle is snuffed. And then, ahead, the path narrowed between 2 small hills, and in that quiet corridor, I saw it. A tree, singular, gnarled, bent with age so great the bark no longer curled, only faded. It bore no leaves, but every branch stretched outward, as if reaching for a breeze that had not returned in years. Beneath it, nestled in the roots, lay a pool of water so still it might have been glass. The reflection within was not the sky. It was the bowl, just the bowl, not sitting in the water, not sunken, reflected, as if the tree or the path or the moor itself held the image, not in surface, but in memory. I knelt slowly, not to drink, but to listen, and the hush grew heavier until it sang, not with voice, with presence. The song was not melody, not rhythm. It was the weight of all that had been held and never emptied. A chorus of unspoken griefs, humming just below sound. I felt them pass through me, not entering, not leaving, only brushing the edges, as if I too had become a vessel. The tree did not move, but the water shimmered, not from light, but from acknowledgement. And the bowl, in its reflection, began to fill, not with liquid, with shadow, faint at first, then fuller. A shade darker than dusk, lighter than memory. It gathered, slow and complete, until it brimmed, but nothing spilled. The air trembled, not the ground, not the leaves, only the space between heartbeats. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, to hold the reflection of what could not be carried. And in that moment, I knew the bowl was never made to contain, only to mirror, and every sorrow it mirrored remained, unclaimed, unnamed, but not forgotten. When I opened my eyes, the reflection had faded. The pool was water again, and the mist had begun to rise, pulled gently by wind from a direction I could not place. The path did not end. It simply vanished beneath the moor once more, disappearing beneath the bracken and dusk. I turned back. The walk was slower than before, and yet, Something had lightened in my step, not from relief, from reverence, as though I had witnessed a prayer not spoken aloud in centuries. And it had heard me. That night, I lit a single candle, set it by the window, watched its flame lean towards the glass as if drawn, and though no wind touched the walls, I heard it. A hush beneath the hush, a song beneath the stillness, the slow sacred turning of something vast and sorrowful. And I knew the bowl still waited, not to be filled, but to be remembered. There is a bell that no longer rings, suspended in the rafters of a sunken tower where ivy has grown inward. Not over, but through. Its roots now braid the stairs, the windows, the beams, until the stone and the green are indistinguishable. It leans slightly, as if listening to its own silence. No one recalls when it last stood upright. No one speaks of it at all, unless in dreams. I reached it near dusk, led by a wind that whispered not direction, but memory. It rustled only the driest leaves, the kind that crumbled when touched, and moved through the trees like someone walking ahead, but just out of sight. The forest gave way slowly, hesitantly, and then opened into a clearing with no edges. Mist hung low, close to the knees. Beneath it, the ground was stone, broken tiles, cracks filled with moss. The ghost of a floor. In the center, the tower leaned, its base swallowed by years, its windows narrow and long, their glass long lost, their hollows filled with fog. No door remained, only the frame, still upright, as if hoping. I stepped through it without sound. The air changed, cooler, thicker, the kind of air that remembers incense, old books, linen soaked in candlelight. It pressed gently against my skin, not unwelcome, only aware, like something that had not been touched in a long time and now watched without judgment. The stair was broken. Each step sagged with lichen. Ivy wove between the rises in slow braids, pulled by a patience only the forgotten possess. I did not climb. I circled instead, my fingers brushing stone and root. The inside of the tower had no center, only a shaft of light from a crack in the roof, pale and soft, slanting down like the last note of a song no longer sung. And there, in the dust that drifted like breath, I saw it, hanging from the beam. The bell, small, tarnished, wrapped with a single vine, as if crowned by silence. It did not sway. It did not rust. It waited, heavy with what it once held. And beneath it, directly below, stood a pedestal. Not carved, not placed, grown, a column of woven roots, rising from the floor as if lifted by the memory of use. And atop it, resting gently on a bed of faded moss, was a bowl. Of course it was. This one was different. Not wider, not taller, just heavier. Its presence pressed against the space around it, the way sorrow thickens a room. I approached slowly. My breath quieted on its own. My pulse did not quicken, but deepened, like it too remembered something. The bowl was not empty. It held dust, fine, grey, soft, as if made from the ashes of things never burned. I leaned close, and for a moment, I saw a pattern traced in the surface, not drawn, but settled, as if something had passed through the bowl without ever touching it. A spiral, incomplete. A breath turned inward, a question. It looked like the shape of sound, not spoken aloud, but withheld at the last moment. The silence after almost, the ache of nearly, and in that shape, I felt it. The bell, not ringing, not moving, but present. And I understood then that it had not been silenced. It had listened for so long, it had become silence. Its purpose no longer to call, but to receive, just as the bowl no longer collected. It remembered. The dust inside stirred, though no wind moved. A ripple passed through it. Slight, circular, dissolving the spiral into something gentler. A soft forgetting. And I thought, then, of all the things I had never said. All the names I had written once and lost. All the letters burned before ink could dry. All the farewells left, hanging in the air, unspoken, unwritten, unneeded. The bowl had held them, all of them. Not just mine, everyone's. Every almost, every not yet, every once. I sat on the floor beside it, my back to the roots, my hands in my lap, and let the hush settle into me. The dust did not rise again. The bell did not sound. But something in the silence shifted, not changed, not broken, opened, like a window long painted shut, creaking slowly under its own weight. The light from above dimmed, not darkened, softened. The kind of dusk that wraps, not ends. And in that soft closing, I closed my eyes. I did not dream. I rested. In a way I had not known I needed. When I woke, I was not cold. I was not sore. But my palms were grey. Not dirt, not soot. Just a fine memory of dust. I did not brush it away. I rose slowly, left the tower without word, and walked back into the trees. The wind had stilled. The clearing had folded behind me, seamless. And though I never turned to see, I knew the bell still hung, and the bowl still waited, and the silence still listened. That night, I wrote a name I had forgotten. Not mine, not anyone's, just a name. And I left it by the window, folded in a piece of old cloth. The wind took it before morning, and in its place, I found a single root, pale, threaded with moss, bent slightly, as if listening. I placed it beside the others, not in a vase. In the bowl I keep on the table, the one that has never held water, only silence. There's a window set into the north-facing wall of a house no longer lived in. The glass has gone opaque with time, its surface veined with frost that never melts. The wood around it is soft, silvered from years of wind, and the shutters hang half open, not from use, but from the slow insistence of gravity. The house leans slightly toward the east, where the trees have pressed close, whispering their limbs against the roof for so long that even the dust inside has begun to shift in rhythm. No path leads to it anymore. The grass grows high and thin, sighing against the stone when the air moves. I found it near the hour when the light loses its warmth, not dark, only cold, and the ground begins to hum with the hush of things not spoken aloud. The house stood not alone, but apart, set slightly downhill from a ruined orchard, whose trees bore no fruit and no blossoms, only bark that cracked in patterns resembling letters that no one had taught. I passed beneath their boughs, careful not to brush the branches, and felt the hush settle deeper in my chest. Inside, everything was soft. The floor was layered in fallen plaster and leaves, stitched together by spiders whose threads hung like forgotten veils. The hearth was intact, but cold. No soot, no ash, only the faint ring of stone where warmth had once rested. The air tasted of long-dried herbs and something older, like paper that had been wept upon. The window faced the forest. I stood before it without knowing why. The frost on the glass pulsed faintly, like breath trapped beneath the surface. Shapes stirred behind it, not reflections, not shadows, only suggestions. A bowl-shaped curve of light, the outline of something cradled in stillness, a shimmer that almost became a word. I reached out. My hand did not touch the glass, but the space between. The air that had held its stillness so long, it had begun to shape memory. And then I heard it, not sound, not voice, the slow turning of something unseen, like a lid shifting on a jar, long sealed, a hinge opening within the ribs. The turning came again, and this time I felt it in my knees. Not pain, not weakness, a grounding, as though something beneath the house had stirred, not in anger, but in recollection. A shape within the earth, beginning to remember the weight it had held. There was a chair near the window. Its cushion had long since frayed, but its frame remained strong. I sat without thinking, my hands folded in my lap, my eyes on the pane that no longer showed the outside. And slowly, very slowly, the frost cleared, not melted, parted. And what I saw through it was not the forest. It was a room, a mirror of the one I sat in, but cleaner, warmer, draped in linen and evening light. The same hearth glowing, the same bowl, yes, a bowl, resting on the mantel, filled not with water or dust, but with light that pulsed like the quiet throb of a lantern under snow. A figure sat where I sat, older, though not by years, older in silence. Their hands were mine, their breath matched mine, their eyes closed, but the bowl shimmered, the light within it not steady, flickering in a pattern that mimicked breath. And I knew somehow that the bowl was remembering me, not as I was, as I had been, as I had nearly become, as I would never fully leave behind. I closed my eyes then, and the air around me thickened, not stifling, wrapping. The way a quilt left out in winter gathers warmth not from fire, but from presence. And in that warmth, a voice, but not a voice, the memory of lullabies, sung from lips I never saw, in a tongue I never learned, but which I understood all the same. It spoke of hollow places, not empty, but waiting, of vessels formed not by need, but by absence, of rooms that remembered the shape of footsteps long after the souls that made them had worn away. I opened my eyes. The window was white again. Frost sealed it from corner to corner, and the room had grown darker, though no sun had moved. I stood slowly. There was no echo in the floorboards, only the creak of wood settling, grateful to bear weight once more. I turned toward the hearth. There, where dust had been, now sat the bowl. My bowl, not lifted, placed, as if it had always been there, its curve shallow, its color dull. But inside, not dust, not water, a small folded slip of paper, no ink, only indentation, as though the words had been pressed into it, then taken away. I did not unfold it. Some messages are not meant to be read, only returned. I left the house as I had entered, slowly, without sound. The orchard bowed slightly in my passing, and though the wind had stilled, the air was filled with the sense of breath, held, released, held again. I walked home with that breath in my lungs, a breath not mine, and yet belonging. And that night, as I lay with my hands folded as they had been in the chair, I dreamed not of bowls or windows, but of rooms, rooms that remembered, rooms that held their silence not as burden, but as offering. And in those rooms, a light that pulsed without source, a light that spoke no truth, only comfort, only presence, only the soft, unfinished shape of something that once tried to say goodbye, but chose, instead, to remain. There is a cavern beneath the hill with no entrance, only a breath. No door marks it, no path leads to it. It exists where the earth forgets to be solid and becomes instead the memory of being held. Those who speak of it, though few do, say it is not found by walking, but by waiting. That it opens slowly, inward, the way sorrow unfolds beneath the skin where no one is listening. I arrived not by choice, not by map, but by stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after too many nights without sleep, when even dreams grow tired of knocking. The trees had blurred around me into silhouettes. The moss no longer clung, it hushed. Beneath my feet, the ground had begun to echo faintly, not like stone, but like something deep remembering weight. And then, without change, I was there. The air turned hollow. The light softened. The shape of the world bent gently, as if cupping a secret. No threshold marked the descent, only a thinning of sound. I passed into the hush with a single breath and did not hear it leave me. The cavern held neither cold nor heat. Its walls were curved, smooth, breathing, not carved, not broken, formed, woven of something darker than stone, but softer, like velvet worn down by reverent touch. No roots reached through, no water trickled. The silence here was whole. It had no edges. I moved as one who remembers rather than one who walks. Each step brought no echo, only a deepening quiet, a layering of hush. My limbs lightened. My name receded, not forgotten, only set aside, the way one might leave a coat at the door of a chapel too old for worship. And then I saw it. A hollow at the center of the floor, circular, shallow, the same size as a bowl. But there was no bowl, only the place where it had been, or perhaps always was. The hollow pulsed faintly, not with light, not with shadow, with something between. It was not filled, yet it was not empty. It remembered fullness, the way a hand remembers a hand once held. I knelt beside it. The floor was warm, not alive, aware. I placed my palm to the hollow and felt it breathe, not air, not rhythm, memory. It flowed up the arm, gentle and weightless, and settled behind the eyes. And with it came the vision, not of a moment, of a shape, a bowl, but not the others, not the one of dust or light or silence. This one was not meant to hold anything at all. This one was made to reflect. A mirror, yes, but not of faces, of loss. I saw it then, not in the cavern, but in the space behind thought. The bowl, wide and silvered, sat atop a surface I could not name. And within it, not water, not fire, not dream, a single thread, thin, red, pulled taut across the center, not cut, suspended. And on it hung every name that had ever been whispered, but never answered. They did not speak. They did not glow. They only waited, each one heavier than silence. I reached, not with hands, but with memory. Touched one. Felt the ache of it ripple outward, folding into the bowl like a tide withdrawing. And then the image faded. The hollow beneath my palm stilled, not gone, rested. I rose. The cavern had darkened, but not from shadow, from the gathering of something tender and irreversible. A grief too old for tears. I turned slowly, not from fear but reverence. And behind me stood the shape of a door, not built, formed, a circle of light without source. Beyond it, nothing, not void. Waiting, I did not step through. I did not move. I stood before it the way one stands before a field that once held a house, with hands that remember and breath that does not rush. And in that pause, the air thickened once more, as though the world had taken its breath and now exhaled not sound, but meaning. I closed my eyes, and the door was gone. When I opened them, the cavern had returned to stillness, and the hollow to shadow. I left without footsteps. The earth folded itself behind me, seamless. The wind outside did not greet me. It passed by gently, as if reluctant to interrupt. The trees did not lean. They stood. They remembered. I walked home in dusk, carrying nothing. But the air was different. It brushed my cheek with care. It hummed beneath my ribs, faintly. And that night, the bowl on my table, the one that had never held flame, or fruit, or ash, seemed heavier. Not filled, attended. I did not look inside. I lit no candles. but I sat beside it, quietly. And for a long while, I listened. To the space between the wind and the wall, to the hush behind my breath, to the place where names go when they have nowhere left to be spoken. And I understood, at last, the bowl was not meant to be held, only remembered. And memory, that most tender, most sorrowful echo, was all it ever asked. There is a hill at the edge of forgetting, where the wind folds inward and the grass grows in spirals no cartographer would trust. It does not appear on maps. Its soil bears no name. But if you stand very still and listen, it finds you. Not in sound, but in stillness. A hush so complete, it begins to shape the air around your body, like robes around a figure too old for memory. I walked there as one walks into a dream long denied. The morning had not begun, nor had the night ended. A narrow hush bridged both. Mist clung low across the slope, thickest near the summit, where the earth curved upward as if offering something back to the sky. There was no path, only remembrance. I felt the hill before I touched it. The ground beneath my feet turned soft, not from dampness, but from memory worn thin, as if the land had carried too much for too long and now yielded gently to even the lightest step. The summit held no tree, no stone, no altar, only a circle. Shallow, wide, pressed into the soil, like the imprint of something vast and unspoken. I stood at its edge, unable to cross, not from fear, from reverence. Inside the circle, the grass was darker, the spiral of it more perfect. And in the center, resting where no hands had placed it, lay a bowl. The last one, or perhaps the first. It was unlike the others. Not dust, not light, not ash or breath or silence. It was empty, yes, but with a fullness that overwhelmed. Its shape was smooth, impossibly smooth, as though it had never been touched, and yet bore the fingerprints of every sorrow ever mourned. I did not approach. The wind did though, if it could be called wind. A slow exhale that passed, not through the trees but through time itself. And as it curled around the bowl, the air shimmered, the bowl shimmered. And then I saw it, not with the eyes, but with the ache beneath the eyes. That place where forgotten grief lives, where the breath stumbles and the name you never learned still waits to be spoken. The bowl lifted, only slightly, only enough to show what lay beneath. Not treasure, not bones, only another bowl, smaller, hollowed by water once kept, now gone. And beneath that, another, and another, each layer thinner than the last, more transparent, until the final one. So fine it was made of nothing at all, only absence, only the echo of a shape the world was not meant to remember. And still, I watched. Within those bowls, not stacked, not nested, but unfolded like petals in reverse, I saw them all. The procession on the stairs, the figure in the glade, the bell in the tower, the spiral in the dust, each one part of the same memory, scattered like stones across the river of silence, now drawn back together by breath, by name, by loss. They had never been separate. Each bowl was a word in a sentence no tongue had spoken since before sky became sky. And that sentence was sorrow. Not sadness, not pain, sorrow. The sorrow of being known only through forgetting, of being called only in silence, of being loved only in ruins. I fell to my knees then, not in worship, but in recognition. My hands trembled, though I had not moved. My heart beat softly, steadily, as though trying to match the rhythm of something older than itself. The bowl did not break, it turned, once, and in that turning, I saw it all. The truth buried in every still image, that the bowl was never meant to hold water or dust or memory. It was meant to hold the shape of what was missing, the ache, The hollow, the sacred wound, a container for the echo, not the sound. And we, each of us, had passed it down, not by choice, but by being born. The bowl had traveled not across land, but through lineage, hand to hand, heart to heart, dream to dream. Each of us had touched it, unknowingly, had carried it in our sleep, had left it behind in places we could no longer find. But it remembered. And now, here, at the edge of the world's breath, it waited no longer. It was complete, not filled, not emptied, complete. I rose. The bowl did not vanish. It remained where it was, more real now than the ground itself. And I stepped backward, slowly, letting the mist fold it away once more. Not to hide it, to protect it. I returned the way I came, though the hill had already begun to forget me. Each footstep grew lighter, as if the soil no longer needed to remember where I had been. When I reached the edge of the trees, I paused. Behind me, the mist settled, the grass quieted, and the hill, the bowl, the sorrow became sky again. That night, I did not sleep. I sat by my window. The candle burned low, and the bowl on my table, the one I had never touched, gleamed faintly in the firelight. Not with flame, with memory. Its surface held the spiral now, so faint I could barely see it. But I knew it was there, pressed into the curve by the hush of all that had come before. And I whispered, not a name, not a prayer, only the breath of something finally understood. That grief is not what we bury, it is what we pass on, shaped not to wound, but to hold. And in that holding, something sacred remains.